Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February the 11th, 2019 meeting of the Sand Board. I want to say we have 3 alternates out of 6 members here tonight. And I see that there's a large public audience here. It would be nice if you would come back when the regular board members are here as well. Okay, not that the alternates can't listen and hear what you have to say, but I think it's important for the primary board members to hear from the public or staff, whatever we call you. Okay? Thank you. It's time, can we have a roll call?
Director Rohrbach?
Here.
Director Blanchard?
Here.
Director Clark?
Here.
Chair Penrose?
Here.
Director Harvey?
Here.
And Director Lohman?
And here.
Chair Penrose, we do not have a secretary tonight, so we need to appoint one.
Appoint a secretary.
For just this one meeting.
For just this one meeting,
Yes.
let's appoint Beverly. You wanna be secretary tonight?
Well, not that I wouldn't normally, but it's a position for the board, so I'm not sure how that would,
Okay, is there
Yeah, I think
anybody
that's-
here who will volunteer to be secretary?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a conflict. Okay?
Okay, I have 2 slips for public forum. George Long, followed by John Zabo.
Good evening. My name is George Long. I'm from Half Moon Bay. We live in 604 Filbert Street. Also, I'm a SAM employee. Been here 31 years almost. So I've been here for quite a long time. So I happen to also be lucky and be our shop steward. So I'm sitting across the table from Fran and from Beverly. So we're in the middle of negotiations. And all the staff. These are all our lovely staff that we have. But as I've noticed in the negotiations, we've kind of set a figure that we kind of want to keep by. But it seems like we're having an issue here with retaining people and recruiting people. And I think we're going to have to relook at how we're going to negotiate through this contract to make sure that we can recruit and retain people. We just had a OIT just leave. He actually got to be a grade 1. He left to go up to Petaluma. And so it tells you that we're not even keeping them. Before, when I was first starting, they would usually move on to higher jobs in bigger plants where they would be supervisors and stuff. Now we're seeing them leave before they're even, we're basically training them and they're heading out there to where they can afford to live and everything else. So that seems to be a big issue there. And the other issue is the collection issue, kind of. We're kind of cutting down the morale of our staff here. It's really hurting the morale. We're trying to build these are the people that usually come up through the things and we make them operators. And those are the people we want to kind of keep because we know they're going to be around, we're going to train them properly. The other issue that I always see that we hear we have a safety record of, what are we at, almost 3,000 days?
A million days.
A million days, right? We've had that, we've gotten so much awards and stuff. Plant hardly ever violates, so, and we hardly have any SSOs anymore. So it tells me that the staff is really doing a good job. So I believe that we're obligated to receive some of the things to retain our employees here and to recruit them. Any questions?
Do you have specific items on the negotiations that you want to talk about?
The biggest issue for a lot of young people is living around here, because pretty much the only people that we can actually hire are people in San Mateo, Pacifica, and Half Moon Bay, because we have an hour time that we have to have them respond. Since we're not a 24-hour plant, if we were a 24-hour plant, of course we wouldn't have that issue, but we'd also have to have more staff on hand. So that's one of the biggest issues. You got you have young parents and stuff with young kids now. They don't want to be on call. I've been on call for 31 years. It ain't fun. It's not easy. Last night, in fact, Sunday night, we had 23 hours. We were in the generator. Somebody had to be here. So it was me and Dave, I think, who were here, covering the plant and stuff. So those are the biggest issues. Just a lot of that. And medical, of course, and living and rent. The guy that's leaving, he was living with 5 or 6 guys. he's going up to Petaluma, he's making the buck there, and he's gonna live up there where he can. So that seems to be the biggest issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Zabo. Hi, John.
Hi there.
Hey, John.
Good evening, board members. My name's John Zaba, and I work around here. The other night, last Thursday night, I went to the Ontario Water and Sanitary District Board meeting. And it was a very refreshing board meeting to go to. I think it lasted about 40 minutes or something. And when things came up, there were just, the director would, just like everybody does here, she'd throw out things that we need or whatever, and it would just always be, yep. And one was sort of humorous, I thought, because I think the yeps already started, and the general manager said, I forgot to mention it's about $200,000, no problem. The district needs it, the citizens deserve it, it's something they need. We don't hear that here. What we see is you guys all come in here in 3 little groups of 2. And then right away the fighting starts. No matter what comes up, it's a fight between, and it always ends up 4-4. I don't know whoever decided in the JP it should be a 4-4 vote, but that's how it always turns out to be, because you guys are always fighting over stuff. You guys go, conflict back and forth on whoever's doing what and where. Granada's doing this, Half of is doing this, Monterey, everybody's cheating everybody. Like I said, I work for Sam. I wear the same shirt, wear it all day long too. But in actuality, I work for Half Moon Bay. I work for the Granada Sanitary District. I work for Montera. That's who we all do. Every employee here, we work for everybody on the coast side. Our job is to keep the sewage where it's supposed to be going and don't let it get out. As long as we get it to here and they treat it properly, we've done our job. In the last year, we've had no overflows, and we're doing our job. I don't know what more we could do except get the sewage where it's supposed to go. So we all work for the coast side, and we don't see any difference in the districts. Whoever calls, you need help, we're there. That's what we do. Usually in less than a half an hour, we're on the scene. This morning, company that's helping Half Moon Bay, or working with Half Moon Bay, Mark Thomas, they called this morning? Yeah, it was this morning. They called and says they were too tired to come over here because they had a problem in Cupertino. I don't know what's going to happen if they're the only ones running the show after a while. What if they're too tired to come here from Cupertino? What's Half Moon Bay going to do? There's a problem. Call us. I don't know. Anyway, we treat you guys all the same, and it would just be nice if sometime you guys would all start doing the same. This is one big district, one big community. You got to take care of the sewage and quit fighting over this stuff and suing each other and bitching about stuff. Just get with the program. We try. Except your individual places, you guys do it to your own. So, but your half-base citizen is no different than that person that lives in El Granada or Montera, or vice versa. We're all in this together. The ocean's out there. It's all our ocean. It's all our beaches. It's our creeks. Ours, all of us. We got to protect them all. I've been here for 53 years now on the coast, and working here at SAM for 15. Sam signs my paychecks, gives me the shirts, but we're all working for you guys. Every single employee here is working for you. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Okay, that closes public comment unless there's someone else. Alrighty, we will now convene in closed session. Okay, we have ended closed session. We are convening an open session, and there is nothing to report out. There's an additional chance for public comment. Is there any public comment? No public comment. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to comment on that, or shall we get a motion? No comment on the consent agenda. Could I have a motion?
So moved. To accept the agenda.
Second.
Who seconded?
Oh, Burback, okay.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor? Aye. Regular business? 7A, discuss treasurer position and provide direction to staff.
This has come up a couple of times in the past couple of meetings. Primarily, Director Dye's concern with regards to the level of responsibility as it is described in the JEPA language. There is some conflicting language because it refers to it as a board position, but then it also refers to it as a staff position. So there was a request for me to look into that and to bring this back and actually have a discussion about how did we want to address it. In many agencies, the treasurer is filled by the manager, or they contract it out. We typically do not have a huge investment portfolio, so it is more than likely overkill to contract it out. I mean, if we were ever to be in a position where we were investing anything other than life, I would recommend that. The Accounting and Financial Policies and Procedure Manual, which you can see from the date, has been since 2005. A lot of those tasks are being performed by staff anyway. The staff, either the general manager or the financial person, in this case it's the administrative services supervisor, does that day-to-day review of the accounting procedures, the transfers of funds. We keep the segregation of duties, but those day-to-day tasks as they were envisioned in the JEPA agreement are already being performed by staff. And I would recommend that, given the language in the contract, given the language that's in the procedures manual, it makes more sense for that to be the case rather than what the board position of treasurer would do.
Yeah, my feelings on this are that it should be staff doing it. On the other hand, I think you don't ever wanna put staff in a position where there may be the appearance of something illicit going on or underhanded going on. And so I don't know who should be named treasurer, but I don't think general manager ought to. Maybe the administrative assistant should be, or maybe we should contract out, I'm not sure. I think it's definitely a staff position. I just wanna make sure we do it so that it doesn't look like we're doing something funny here.
Well, and typically it would be your financial person, but then once again, that would be something that you would still have to segregate out the duties. And because I am the person who maintains the bank accounts, that's why it makes sense for me to be the treasurer, because that's what I'm
On the other hand, it
doing.
makes sense that since you're handling the accounts, somebody else ought to be doing the overseeing.
Well,
Do you know what I'm saying?
somebody
Just that
is.
separation of,
That's why I don't do the bank reconciliations, that's why I don't do the deposits, is because I'm managing the accounts themselves. And so the day-to-day reconciliation of the daily cash receipts, the checks, things like that, are segregated out for that very reason, because I do manage the actual bank accounts themselves.
And you sign checks.
But I'm only one signature on
I
the
know,
check.
I know.
All checks have to have a second signature,
I know, right,
so,
the second signature is done by the board members.
right,
right.
right.
Right,
So
but the
I-
board members just sit here and write, just sign the checks, we're not doing any overseeing. Not that
I-
we shouldn't be, maybe we
Yeah.
should be, but that's actually what in fact happens, we get a bunch of checks and we sit here and
There
sign
they
them
are.
all.
Actually, that's not been my experience since I've been here. The ones that sign the checks here typically go through them with a fine tooth comb, and I have answered many a question on checks before they've been signed. So, that hasn't been, my experience here has been that they've been looked at quite closely. And that's typically because the person who's doing it, the treasurer of the board, is taking that part of the treasurer's duties very seriously. That's that last point of review.
Back in the good old days, I was the treasurer here, and there seemed to be some other things we haven't, they're not big duties, but this might be something that a board treasurer could take care of. When the auditors come in, there's some audit reports they create, and it wasn't like a big job, but I was supposed to talk to them. We got together and talked about the evaluation. It was like, then there was a board member involved in the auditing approval process and signing off on the audits. That seems like a pretty reasonable thing to ask our treasurer to do. Hey, it's like once a year, but it gives the board another look at, you know, the discussions and the things that pop up and stuff like that. Obviously, it's like you can't have the accounts payable clerk, you know, writing the purchase orders and stuff like that, the standard stuff. That seemed to be a little thing the board could do to just be another eyes looking at the thing on the, when the audit reports came out. And there was a little thing, the auditor would ask you a bunch of questions. Do you know about any inconsistencies and stuff like that? And there was a board member who said, yes, and I also have not heard of anything or suspect anything. I'd like the board to keep that at least. It's just a, you know, just another signature and look at the process.
Right, and
But
the
the whole-
auditor
yeah.
always asks that fraud question of the board.
And I'm sure there's a reason why the JPA calls for a treasurer on the board and then also says there's a staff position that has the responsibility. So I'm assuming that things like that would be a perfect task for the board member who is appointed as treasurer.
Yeah, but, you know, daily reconciliations, and like when Barbara was freaking out, I hadn't read that part in a long time. I said, well, no, we don't want a board member responsible for all that stuff, you know, also, so. I don't know if we could look at the responsibilities in the JPA better and say, you know, this goes staff, this goes board, and just run down them real quick or something over the next meeting.
Well, and they were,
Just say, here's how we should think we should distribute it, and boom, we're done.
Yeah,
well, and in the JPA, it does already differentiate it.
Mhm.
It calls the board treasurer, and then the lists of all the duties is under the staff position. So I think it already envisions that day-to-day operational work is being done by staff.
Staff.
one of the difficulties I have with discussing this right now is that Barbara, who was nominated as secretary treasurer, is reluctant to take the position. So, you know, until she is satisfied or somebody else wants to step in and take it, I think we should have Barbara here for the discussion. What do you think?
I agree.
Yeah, and is it, I don't remember, the reading of the JP, I didn't remember it being quite that well defined. But if we could just have just a quick summary of that, the next meeting that just says, we are proposing board treasurer have these things, staff treasurer have these things.
Mhm.
Just make it real simple so we can just look at it and then vote.
Great.
I don't wanna stall this, but then.
No, I don't wanna
it's
stall
done.
it, but I want
I
Barbara
don't
to
wanna
be
lose
part of the
Barbara.
discussion. Okay.
Okay.
Okay? We'll do that.
Okay, and then 7B.
So this, once again, was a request that the several members of the board have expressed, that because there are oftentimes members of the public or staff or consultants that are here to do presentations, and our closed sessions can sometimes go in.
Like today.
Like today, that other agencies have established that their closed session is at the end of the meeting. And so we've talked about that off and on in my tenure here, and it was requested that we bring it back to discuss it again. Clearly, if that is the board's desire, then adoption of the resolution as it's presented would do that, and order it at the end. And then, of course, there's always at the,
We should switch if
you
there's
could
an
always do it
exception.
at the meeting if there's an
Something where-
exception, correct. So if there were a particular situation where someone was here to speak on the closed session item, you could put that item at the front of the meeting. deal with it and then go back later.
Right, and the resolution, both the one that's proposed and the existing one already provide that authority to the chair. Both of them provide that authority to the chair.
Okay, well, I'm certainly in
I
favor
brought
of it.
this up and I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, good.
Montera does this, we just stick it at the end of the meeting, it
Yeah,
just
really,
seems,
it's much fairer to everyone, yeah.
Okay, so
Okay,
then
can I
at
have a
that
motion
point,
then?
yeah,
I make that motion.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
that was
Sorry.
Blanchard.
Blanchard, okay, thank you, sorry. I look down to right and I don't, yeah.
7C, discuss the history of flare repairs and cost and long-term solutions.
So as requested a couple of meetings ago, specifically Director Penrose, was talking about how we can resolve the issue of this consistently failing flare system. And you had asked us to go back and to look at what the approximate cost has been over a period of time, and then also to talk about what really are our options. And so both Kishan and Tim have worked on the options as well as the financial staff to identify those costs. We had not been tracking staff costs for the flare circumstances, but certainly anytime we've had one of the vendors come out and do any work on it, clearly those would have been ones where we would have categorized it specifically, that issue. So I'll let Tim and Kishan talk about what are our options.
If I could just jump in for a second, because we brought this up at the Montera meeting, and Pippin from Montera, the engineer, I thought brought up some very interesting points, and I was gonna say, well, we really need Kishan to get into this, so I called Clemens, and Clemens said, no, I can't talk to you because I'm talking to Kishan right now about the flare project. So I think between all of those people, I think they got some very interesting options. It's a big, broad spectrum of cost and everything. I think it's gonna be a great discussion.
Me? I mean, yeah, Kishan talked to Pippin, I didn't actually talk to Pippin. I went back through the past receipts that we'd had from R.F. McDonald, which is our primary care provider, if you will, for the flare. And it totaled up to about $60,000. I mean, we're looking.
Over what period was this?
I think, did I go back, I believe, 4 years? And the
It was
staff.
2 years.
2 years in the
I
staff
thought I went
report.
further than that.
Yeah, no, 2 years.
I don't even know
2
what I
years. And do we have a base, I mean, sort of a guesstimate about the amount, the cost of the staff time?
wrote. No, because we never actually tracked the staff time. All we know is they would get an alarm. It would be a SAM-related alarm, and so we didn't actually track specific overtime related to the flare. And unless we actually go through all the overtime over the past years of all the operators, to actually try to.
Couldn't we
create something
guesstimate
like
how many
that.
hours it takes for McDonald to come out, for staff to be there? And I mean, is it a 4-hour window or is it an 8-hour window? I mean,
It
even
depends,
if we
well,
had,
because sometimes R.F. McDonald will come out and they'll come out during hours, but then they might end up working late. So it's not necessarily a 2-hour minimum because staff might just be here late. Sometimes in the middle of the night, if we have to call them in, hopefully we don't, or they're on another project, they don't get here until after staff has gone for the day and then has to come back or has to wait for them. So the actual time associated, like I said, without going through and pulling the overtime slips that they filled, the handwritten slips that they've filled out over the years to see what they did and where they were exactly when the flare failed, it would be quite a task to come up with that information.
then we don't know what it's costing us.
Staff time.
I mean, staff
no.
time is could be a large portion of it. It
Staff
could be
time-
equal to the 50,000, it could be twice the 50,000. I just don't even know where to go with that then.
Yeah,
I can tell you it's not going to be that costly. If you're looking in that same time frame, it's not going to be anywhere near the 50,000, but it's more as much as anything else, the nuisance alarms. It's the fact that if an operator's on standby and they get 4 alarms and that interrupts them when they're trying to get sleep before they have to come in and work the next day, they may not have to physically respond to the plant. It might be something where it's something they would address the next morning, but they've been woken up multiple times when that alarm went off. Sometimes it's in the daytime, sometimes it's on the weekend.
Right.
So it's more that it's a constant nuisance, even when it doesn't create an emergency.
Sometimes they can start a second boiler to deal with the excess gas, because really that's what it's for. The primary job of the flare is to burn any excess gas, waste gas, right, waste gas flare, waste gas, that the boiler is not utilizing to heat the digester if we're creating more gas. So sometimes they could turn on a second boiler, and they can do that remotely on the phone. But then if the boiler fails due to carbon buildup or something in the boiler, which also occurs, then they do have to come in. So it's really hard to say without going through the logs and reading all the logs that the operators handwrite, because it's not in a database where we can just do a query on a search, flare fail. We would actually have to physically go through the logs over the past years and see when they came in, what they came in. Were they here? Were they actually on site and then waiting for RF McDonald? Did they have to come back when RF McDonald came in? Did the flare fail? They were able to start a second boiler, and then for whatever reason the boiler failed, and then they had to come in to deal with 2 things. So it's just, yeah. You see where I'm going with that?
I do see where you're going.
It would be nice to, if we captured specifically that the flare failed, that would be awesome.
And going forward with the Lucity system, that's something we would be able to do, because we could enter that as a work order, something that was done.
Yep.
And we could code it to those specific things, but to go back and recreate it, it would be quite time consuming.
Okay.
It seemed to me from the other prior discussions that one of the biggest decisions was, Kishan found a very elegant, replacement solution.
Yep.
And then Pippin came in and said, well, have you considered this kind of a repair with some stainless steel parts and stuff like that? It would be, what would be the yearly rate of return? How many years would it take with a new one? And what does that look like compared to a nice repair?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it would be that kind of a decision. Do we want to repair it again if we're ensured that this new repair would last for X number of years because it's a little better repair, versus getting a new sophisticated one that converts it to energy we can use and, pay back that thing? That would be the kind of, but, so.
Yeah, we've just done a preliminary study, and with the amount of heat that we get from the digester gas, we can go for a very small micro turbine, which will be a combined heat and power generation, like a cogeneration, so that the turbine would generate electricity, and the waste heat would be used for the anaerobic digestion process. So we approached a couple of people, and we have found that a lot of small wastewater plants of our size have been using such technology. And I found some of them way in the East Coast who have used such a thing. And we've reached out to a micro turbine supplier, and I just got a ballpark estimate of about 300,000. So basically we would like to know whether we need to put in more hours and pursue this option, so that we can put it in our 5-year CIP and come out with this option, or any other alternate option of renewable energy, and trying to see how we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions.
Have you folks analyzed Pippin's, I'll just call it the replacement option? Did that look feasible? Is that just a stopgap measure?
I
Did
was
it
not
look-
part of that
No,
conversation. That
I
was
haven't had a
just-
chance to
Okay.
talk to Pippin after I spoke with Clemens, so I need to get more details.
Because to me, they both seem like great solutions. If we're massively money strapped now, maybe this super repair would be the best way to go. But, you know, I'd certainly rely on you two folks to give us a recommendation on that, which way to go. Because obviously this is a little better solution because you get to reuse energy and that's pretty cool.
Right,
But if we feel we don't have any money left, you know, maybe we push it off with a very nice repair that would eliminate all, you know, extra people having to come in all the time and, you know, take care of the people getting woke up all the time and stuff like that, which we always want to get rid of.
yeah.
I'd like to see, you know, I don't want, you know, spend 3 hours tonight analyzing that, but I'd just love to see you guys say, well, this is good because, and this is a 3-year payback. So well, let's go ahead and, you know, buy the big solution if it's a 3-year payback, but if it's a 10-year payback, well, it's a little different, that's.
One thing to keep in mind with the micro turbine, does everyone kinda have a general idea? I don't wanna go off topic too much. How exactly like the boiler heating of the digester and everything works, and how you would use a micro turbine or a cogen, the process, how their similarities and how they would heat the digester. Do you guys understand that, or do you want us to go into detail on that,
Maybe
or
if
not
you-
really?
Maybe if you come back with a report discussing our options, we could do it at that time.
Okay. Because another
I
thing
think that would
with
be
the
very
micro
useful.
turbine, not to cut you off, but the, one thing with micro turbine that we're looking at is a gas, or you call it a scrubber of sorts. So digester gas in general, it's extremely dirty gas. And that's a lot of the problems we have with the boilers, the failures on the boilers due to carbon buildup on the igniter, which is inside the boiler, which is another thing we have to call in RF McDonald for, because we're not boiler techs and you have to open the back of the boiler up even to access anything. So we have to call them up whenever we have carbon buildup, because it's not just an easy fix. Part of the micro turbine, part of that whole project would be a gas scrubber that helps to reduce or eliminate, I'm not gonna say eliminate because that's probably not gonna happen, but it's gonna greatly reduce the carbon buildup that you have not only in micro turbine, but also in the boilers. So the callouts that we actually get in the boilers for just, you know, callouts or failures that are nuisance failures due to carbon buildup could actually be reduced also. So that, I mean, that's definitely a good contributing factor if we're looking at that type of technology.
Great,
And we'll bring that forward at a future meeting,
Great.
so that we can have a more lengthy discussion on that.
excellent, thank you.
And are you, the staff report starts with a methane fueled combined heat and power generation micro turbine, and then every reference after that is to, in plural. So are we talking one of these, or the micro turbines would combust methane, the waste heat from the micro turbines would be used? So is that one of these devices, or several?
We put the plural thing because when I spoke to the vendor, he said we could possibly have 2 30 kW micro turbines one by side instead of having one big one. So that's why I gave the plural thing. Otherwise, technology wise, it is just a micro turbine.
Mhm.
It's just the sizing part of it depending upon their standard, whatever is available, which fits into our heat demand.
So it could be too small, one larger, it
Exactly.
just depends on the
Yep.
project and what's specified.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to general manager's report.
So I just wanted to inform the board that, as I had mentioned, we do have one of our operators is moving on. This Friday will be his last day, and we still had a list when we had done the recruitment a year ago. And so we selected someone off of that list, and that is someone who is currently employed already with Sam, Keith Harvey, and he has accepted the offer, so he will be moving over into the operator and training position starting, I believe, the 25th,
I think.
excuse me, 25th of this month. That will create a vacancy in the collection system services, but we are looking at some temporary staffing that we can use to fill that. And then once we have a better idea of where the contract services are going, then we can look at actually recruiting to fill that.
Great. Okay. Attorney's report.
Well, I think I gave enough of a report in closed session. I had promised to come back here and give you an update on governance laws. I'll be generating that for another client, and I will, what I did last year is I sent around a memo that sort of detailed some of the changes in Brown Act, Public Records Act, and Conflict of Interest law. So I expect to be doing that later this month.
Thank you. Directors, any reports? Topics for future board consideration, anything to be added to that or taken away from that? All right, I will adjourn the meeting then.
Thank you.